Every second that passes here in the United States, we're using the same amount of electricity as an entire small nation. And I'm not kidding when I say that. With every new technology, whether it's a cell phone or a server or the newest electric vehicle, we're demanding more of our energy too. Technological innovation is not slowing down. Our homes are getting smarter, our cars are getting cleaner, and our lives are more connected than ever. With every swipe, every stream, every "Hey Siri" or Alexa, somewhere there's energy moving through the wires. There's a data center humming in Ohio, probably. And lastly, there's a grid under pressure. Now, technology is not slowing down. It's important to celebrate it when it's moving. But at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we're moving it forward. We've got to make sure we're asking the right questions. Where does power come from? Can our systems keep up? Can our planet? Now, these are technical questions, but they're also human ones too. And the answer is still unfolding. Everything I've said up until this point was written by ChatGPT. Okay? Could you tell by the list of 3 things in a row over and over and over again? Maybe I told it like TEDx style, please, you know? And then I also said, do better, when it gave me a really bad first draft. So I sent 2 ChatGPT prompts in. And earlier we learned that one ChatGPT prompt takes 10 times as much energy as a Google search. That's fascinating to me. And that also indicates a problem. Now, I want to start off with a story here. I was once interviewing with a magazine editorial article person, and they go through and they ask me, Grace, what do you do for work? I go, I make energy. That's what I do. I'm a nuclear engineer. I boil water in a very fancy way. That's what I do. Now, I go through and I say, I make energy. And they look at me and they go, oh, great. We have this edition of our magazine called Manifest. It's about magic and vibe setting and energizing yourself. And I'm like, oh, no. Oh, no. So I'm like, okay, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. Like, I work in nuclear electricity, like generating electricity and energy as a whole. I'm really sorry. Do you want to keep doing the interview or not? And she did, which was really cool. I'm like, thanks so much for dealing with me. But I say that because I want to highlight that when I use the word energy, I also mean electricity, so 2 interchangeable things. Now, I'm 23 years old. I've grown up with technology, I've grown up with a phone, I've grown up with video games. Is that a shock? So many people were just like, okay. So I've grown up with all of this technology here. And for me personally, I know that if the zombie apocalypse happened tomorrow, I am one of the first people to die. You want to know why? The first thing I'm going for is chapstick. That's why I'm going to die. I can't make a fire with 2 sticks. I never did Girl Scouts. I'm not that accomplished, okay? Now I go through, and I highlight this because I acknowledge I can't survive without energy. I can't survive without electricity. When I moved out here to the East Coast, I live in Delaware now, woo, instead of Wisconsin, woo. But when I moved out here to the East Coast, I had to use a GPS to get to work for the first 3 weeks. I didn't know how to commute, I didn't know where to go, and I just did what I've always done. I used my phone. Energy is a part of our everyday life, but it wasn't always like that. When it was first introduced, it was a light bulb. It was meant to help people socialize after dark or stay working after the sun went down. Maybe they stayed out on their farms. I don't know. AI wasn't around at that time yet, right? Now with that, why is it today when I tour apartments and I go in a bedroom and there's no light bulb, I'm like immediate no, I'm sick of buying lamps, like I'm done. Why is a light bulb now a necessity up in that apartment tour? Now, looking at a different perspective, there's about 685,000 Americans that rely on an electric-powered medical device to keep them alive. That puts energy in a very different bucket than, hey, I want a ceiling light in my bedroom, to I need energy to live, to breathe, to exist. So is energy a luxury or a necessity there? At the same time, tomorrow I'm driving to West Virginia for Memorial Day weekend and I'm gonna go camping. My goal is to power my phone off and shut down my work computer and disconnect from electricity and the responsibilities that come with it. I want to avoid that. Disconnecting is a luxury. Yet at the same time, there's a power outage somewhere out there in the world, and I can promise you, there are people that are calling their power generation companies and transmission and distribution, and they're like, why isn't my power back on? Like, what are you doing? Get it together. And you're like, dude, there was a tornado. I don't know what to tell you. I promise you that's like exactly what happens on our end when we get those 600 calls. It's like, did you look outside? Like, there's a lot that happened here. So disconnecting is a luxury when we go camping and we want to get away from it. Yet when we have a power outage, we're angry because we need this electricity, right? We need it to survive. So I ask this question: is energy a necessity or is it a luxury? Now, I honestly can't answer that question for you. You'll have to come up with that answer on your own. But I do want to bring up one thing. Energy is necessary for technological development. Now, I talked about ChatGPT at the beginning of the speech, and I promise I am not a coder, so I cannot tell you a single thing other than me just yelling at ChatGPT, telling it to do better. I don't know anything else about AI. But what I do know is it needs electricity to grow and flourish and do all of the things that we want it to do. Now, the growth of AI is intense. According to the International Energy Agency, by 2030, we're expecting to see about 1,000 terawatt hours of electricity committed to artificial intelligence. We all know what a terawatt hour of electricity is, right? That's normal terminology. One guy said, yeah. One guy said, yeah. I was like, I saw that. He's like, yeah, I do. So to put that into consumable terms, if we look at the entire United States electricity usage every year, 1,000 terawatts is a quarter of that. That's a lot of electricity. That's a lot of electricity. So in 5 years, we need to build out a quarter of what we have today, in addition to keeping our current grid operating and existing and powering our lives. So the question is can our grid accommodate for this growth? Now, the biggest thing here that I want to dive into is, what is the grid? What needs to grow? Do we just build more plants? Is that the solution? There's 3 major parts of the electricity grid. I briefly mentioned them when I talked about the power outages: generation, transmission, and distribution. I, as a nuclear engineer, work in generation. I use fancy hot rocks to boil water to make steam, to turn a turbine, to spin a generator. I spent a lot of money in 4 years getting a degree that taught me that, and you guys just learned it in about 15 seconds, okay? Put it on your LinkedIn. It's fine. You're good. All right? Now, once that generator is spinning, it's actually creating electricity. Now, it's then transmitted. This is the transmission part of the grid. It's put on high voltage lines and transferred long distances. This is why a power plant outside of Phoenix can sell electricity to Southern California. The last stage is distribution. Takes off a tiny sliver from that high voltage line, switches it to a low voltage line, and that's what gets to your house when you flip on that light switch. When you flip on your light switches, it's not magic. It is an entire system. It is one of the world's largest machines, the entire American grid. Now, talking about switching on lights, we've got 100 people in this room, and let's say we're the entire population. Now, when we go home tonight, you guys might have a long commute, a short commute, let's say between 30 and 40 minutes to an hour. Everyone's going to be switching their lights on to take their shoes off. Maybe they're going to go take a shower. Maybe they're going to start cooking some food, so opening up their fridge. They're going to turn on their heat because why is it so cold today? I thought it was summer. So everybody's going to be using that electricity all at once. This is what's called power peaking. When we have electricity go from needing this much to all of a sudden when we're all using it, we need that much. Now, the opposite end of that is baseload power. Power that's always on, always available, always there. And this is mostly for things like thinking about your fridge. You don't want your fridge to shut off at midnight, right? You want it to just keep running pretty much 24 hours a day. Same with maybe the temperature control in your home. Baseload power makes sure that when we go home and flip those lights on, that they actually turn on. And this is about 70% of our overall grid. Now, once you layer in artificial intelligence, you're going to see all of these things increase. Baseload is going to go up a little bit, but power peaking is going to get even more dramatic because somebody's going to be yelling at ChatGPT because they're like, why did my power go out again, or something like that. And it's because everybody's using ChatGPT now, and we don't have enough electricity to do that. Now, the bigger issue here, or one of many issues that need to be mitigated here, is that right now, you and me and all of us here, we've kind of always been the primary customer of the electric grid. Now, I'm an engineer. I was never good at economics, but looking at a supply and demand situation, if there's not enough supply and a high amount of demand, what does that make prices do? Go up. So all of a sudden now, we're gonna have this stuff affecting us. And I don't know about you guys, I can't afford for my utility bill to keep going up. All right, rent is enough for me. Have you seen trying to buy a home in this economy? It's horrible. You know, I already have to like arm wrestle people for eggs at the grocery store. The last thing I want to do is arm wrestle them for my utility bill, you know? Now, when I bring that up, I want to emphasize here that we don't need to arm wrestle people for our utility bills. Not if we start seriously pursuing nuclear energy. We learned a little bit about it earlier this evening, but nuclear energy is an emissions-free source of energy. It outlasts administrations and the politics. It outlasts the misconceptions, and it's a resilient technology. We've had it around for decades. It's quite literally so clean that you can operate it underwater. The proof? Our nuclear navy. All of those nuclear-powered submarines, they couldn't stay underwater for as long as they do with a diesel engine. They can only do it with a nuclear reactor. And that stuff is crazy, by the way, the Navy reactors. Very fascinating. But with that, nuclear needs to be considered much more strongly. It's already being talked about. We're hearing the discussions. We're hearing the conversation. We're seeing Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all of these massive companies say, we want nuclear. We're seeing World Bank say, we're going to fund this. We're seeing regulatory changes. The last thing we need is overwhelming public demand. Overwhelming public demand outlasts any of these other issues. And that's up to us. You know, when I think back to that magazine interview I did a little bit ago, I sometimes think maybe she's right. Maybe I do manifest. Maybe I am a vibe setter or whatever she said. I don't know. What I'm manifesting is a future where my kids don't have to worry about their electricity usage. They can use artificial intelligence as a tool. I'm manifesting that nuclear energy is accessible for people. And most importantly, I'm manifesting that energy is a luxury here in America that everyone has access to. The general public, companies, innovators, and everyone alike. That's the only way that we can capitalize on this technology moving forward and continue growing humanity. So with that, let's get to work, because why not now? Thank you.